Praise the Lord, everybody. I am excited to have our very own Pastor Cody Thompson. And I would say that this was uh, definitely an answered prayer. Actually, I remember mentioning this to you multiple times that, Pastor, I've got to interview you. Pastor, we've got to interview the history of this church. And so we've finally made it happen. And I thank God for it. Let me just give a brief introduction. This is the man of God, Cody Thompson. He's a man of God, a husband, father, church planner, pastor, former presbyter of Section 5, currently our district secretary of the Florida district. And in that order, he's a man of prayer, a man of worship, and he is my pastor. He baptized me in Jesus' name. He was there, preached the message when I was filled with the baptism of the Holy Ghost. And so it is an absolute honor to have our very own pastor here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. I tell you that I often say he is the hidden treasure of the Florida district. And um, when the Lord kind of put it in my heart to even start whatever we would call a podcast interview or whatever, my very first plan, my very first desire was I want to interview my pastor. And so we're going to talk about the history of the Pentecostals of Orange Park. We have seen great things here at this church. We've seen miracles. We've seen people changed, lives healed, delivered, saved. But we want to talk about the beginning. And so, Pastor, I want you to just take your time. I want to start with uh, where you grew up, when you got in church, how that was, what you did in your church, and then we'll kind of flow from there uh, into the history. So tell us where you're from. Tell us where the Lord got a hold of you.
All right. It's good to be here, and thank you for this. So I'm from DeQuincy, Louisiana,
Hmm.
and of course, DeQuincy has a rich history and heritage to the apostolic faith. I'm fifth generation Pentecostal,
Oh wow, I didn't know
and
that.
so I was born, literally born in church. Dedicated as a baby in church, even though my parents didn't always live for God.
Mm.
My grandmother did, and so I was raised in church. Um, was baptized when I was 12 and received the Holy Ghost at a youth camp when I was 13.
On
Um,
the Louisiana District campgrounds,
yes, that is correct.
the
Yes.
famous campgrounds.
Yeah. And but I didn't feel a call to preach for many years after that. But I did get involved as a teenager. I was a drummer,
Mm.
and then worked in bus ministry, drove a van, all that,
Mm.
outreach and all of that, by teaching Bible studies. And then when I was 25, I felt the call to preach, and
Wow.
yeah,
And so who was your pastor at that
my
time?
pastor was T.D. Cardwell. He's
T.D. Cardwell.
passed on about 4 years ago. That last month, he passed away.
And if I'm not mistaken, you have mentioned T.D. Cardwell, his pastor was T.W. Barnes,
That's
right?
correct. His pastor was T.W.
Wow,
Barnes.
that's
Yes.
the connections are just those are
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at 25, you felt the call. Was it just a call to just describe that call? Was it like you just felt something there was more, or was there?
I just knew, like I said, I was already involved, you know, drummer, Bible studies,
Mm,
outreach, all of that. But I just really felt that God was leading me into a pulpit ministry,
mm,
a preaching ministry, and so I just couldn't shake it, couldn't get away
yeah.
from it. I did have a career already. I was a draftsman, pipe designer,
Mm,
working in the refineries over there in Louisiana and Texas, and but I couldn't get away from the call. And so on a Sunday afternoon, I went and talked to my pastor. It was a February on a Sunday afternoon. He was getting ready for Sunday night service, and I went to his office and told him that I just felt the call and I couldn't
yeah.
get away from it. And so he surprised me, and that very night I was on the drums.
Uh-huh.
He called me to the podium and said, "Say something," or I don't remember exactly what he said, but he might have said, "Preach a little" or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
And so I did, and I said just a few things. I turned around, went back to the drums. He said, "Come back,
Oh,
do it." He
what?
said, "Come back and give us more." And so he did that twice that night. So 3 times I had to go to the pulpit that night, and uh, I was, I was shocked. Of course, I was already on the platform because of drums, but that was a
Yeah.
completely different,
Oh, yeah.
you know, feeling and all of that. But then I preached my first message a month later in March.
Uh-huh.
And that was 1993. And so,
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of where it started.
Unheard of. I I've never heard that story. That's incredible. That's incredible. Now, were your parents in the congregation at that time when he called
No,
you?
no,
Okay.
no.
So, were any family there? Was there any family
My
there?
grandmother, my sister, probably my younger brother,
Had you talking or talked with them about that call, or was it only your pastor?
just my pastor.
Okay, so you come from the drums, and he tells you to go preach,
Yeah,
and you do that 3 times.
yeah.
What's your family's face like? What's the reaction after service, after altar call and all
Um,
that?
oh, after service, yeah, everybody was, just, wow, we didn't know.
Yeah.
He told the congregation that I had come to him that day.
Okay.
Yeah, that afternoon he told them that I had come to him that
Yeah.
day and felt a call to preach, and so he did warn them a little. But of course, everybody that watched me grow up, they were so excited,
Yeah.
and my grandmother, and they're all so excited, and really what I did, um, because I was just so shocked. I just went up there and mostly quoted Isaiah and talked about the oneness of God.
Come on, somebody.
So that's all. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Was Isaiah, quoting Isaiah, which I most of them I can't even quote today, but I could then, because that back then I was really memorizing a lot of
Yeah.
oneness things in
Yeah.
Isaiah. So
I will say though, just as a hearer of your preaching, whenever there is a message where you're talking about the revelation of the name of Jesus or the oneness of God, I do realize that majority of your quotations come from Isaiah. It's
that's
Isaiah
correct.
41,
Yeah.
Isaiah 40, Isaiah 46, I believe. So I still there's reverberations of that
Sure.
memorization
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
bleeds out of your preaching whenever you do mention that. So that's
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah. So
Well, so you're 25, you said.
I was 25.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us about the transition of from that time where, okay, I feel that call. I just did this with my pastor. My pastor asked me to preach. I just did this. Tell me about the transition from either from when you preached that first time into a particular ministry, and then we'll talk about as well where you met your wife, sister Christie Thompson.
Okay. So from that from that moment on, and like I said, March, just the very next month after
Hmm.
that Sunday night in February, they had me preach the full message or a full service at a youth service. So that was
Hmm.
the actual first service, first message, I guess, in March of '93. And let's see, that later that year, well, first of all, my pastor was presbyter
Hmm.
in that section of Louisiana, and he began to send me out a little bit when a pastor would call, hey, can you send somebody for a Wednesday night for me?
Yeah.
He would send me,
Okay.
and so I would go around there's a lot of churches around DeQuincy, and
Yeah.
so I would go to some of the smaller churches and preach on a Wednesday night for them. Sometimes on a Sunday night or Sunday morning even, but mostly Wednesday nights I would go around and preach. And then that December is when I first. I'm sorry, December of 1994 is when I met my wife. But
Okay.
during this process, when I was working as a pipe designer, draftsman, all of that in the refineries, when I would have a break, I would just go to my maps. I love maps, and I
Yeah.
had a big trucker's atlas in my office.
For the
And
Gen Z people watching, map is it's this big piece of paper that it has roads, it has
right,
countries.
right.
It's not Google Maps, it's a
Right. No,
literal map.
it was a literal map, a spiral bound book. It's called a trucker's atlas. It's pretty big. It's
Oh
got all the
man.
states and all of that, of course. And so, uh, I would go to that, and somehow I just kept ending up in Florida, and specifically Jacksonville, Florida.
Mm,
And then so through the process of a little time there, I started thinking about, maybe one day I'll live in Jacksonville. Why? I don't know, because
yeah.
I'd never been here, didn't know anybody here, didn't know anybody in Florida at all. And but then, of course, over time, God began to deal with me about starting a church
Hmm.
here. And I remember one time asking our pastor's son, who was the assistant pastor at the time,
Yeah.
if they're, to tell me about churches in the Jacksonville area, and if there were any. And he said, "Why, you want to start one?" And I just kind of laughed it off,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
it was very new at that time. And
yeah,
I just kind of laughed it off, and said, "I was just wondering,"
yeah.
and that sort of thing. And so,
Well, he was in the Holy Ghost.
oh, absolutely, he sure was, and that was his lifestyle too. But so I met my wife in December um, of '94,
Hmm.
and then we just met briefly. Somebody introduced us. We just met
Yeah,
briefly for a few minutes, but then I saw her again in March of '95. At the Texas District Conference, a friend of mine called me at work and said, "Hey, what you doing tonight?" I said, "I don't have anything going on." He said, "Let's
yeah.
go to Texas District Conference." Well, sure,
Which, I assume that's the same campgrounds in Lufkin. In
that was in
Lufkin.
Lufkin. Yeah, that's
Lufkin,
campgrounds in
Texas
Lufkin. Yes,
campgrounds.
and so I said, "Yeah, let's go." And
Yeah,
we get there, for the service. After service, I see her, and I remembered meeting her. I said, "Oh, I just met her,
yeah,
a few months ago." So a bunch of us went out to eat, and we started talking. And I went and saw her the next Sunday night after our service was over. Went to their service, and we went out to eat again, and then we started dating, and we were married in '95, January of '95.
January '95.
Yeah.
Now, really quick, give us a brief synopsis. Where was she at in her particular like state of life, ministry, et cetera, in her home church?
Okay, so she grew up in Orange, Texas. Her grandfather was uh, the late Reverend W.E. Gamblin,
Yeah.
um, and he'd pastored there for many years. At the time, her pastor was when I met her. Her pastor was David Foss.
Hmm.
So she grew up in Orange, Texas. She was, very involved there in singing and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started dating, and then just decided, I asked her to marry me. We were married in, like I said, in January of '95,
Hmm.
and just within 2 weeks, we were offered a position to be the assistant pastor of a church there near Lake Charles, out in sort of the woods, but of course my pastor said, the pastor there had talked to my pastor
Hmm.
first, and he told him, he said, "You need to go. It'd be a good experience for
Yeah.
you." So we were there for 6 months. Of course, both of us, she at first wasn't real keen on the idea of starting a church,
Yeah.
in Florida, moving away and all of that. But it took a little time, but God was dealing with her and worked on her.
Yeah.
But 6 months after going to that church there in Louisiana, my pastor called me and said another pastor, which was Pastor Bill Smith, W.W. Smith in
Wow.
Orange, Texas, not my wife's home church, but another church there in Orange,
Yeah.
Pinehurst. He said that he called and wants, you and Christie to come be his assistant
Yeah.
pastor. And I said, "What should I do?" He said, "You need to go."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." So I left the church we were at there and went into Texas.
This would be June, July-ish of '95.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that time
That
range.
time, yeah,
Hmm.
that time range there. So we went to Orange, Pinehurst, Texas, assistant pastor to Brother Bill Smith,
Hmm.
um, and stayed there. I believe it was 18 months, and then received a call to go to Texas City,
Hmm.
Texas, under Pastor Mike Wedgeworth.
Okay.
Uh, took some time to pray about that, but we ended up going there in December, and then we stayed there another year and a half. But really, while we were in Texas City, is when the call to come to Florida just become so strong,
Yeah.
for both of us, and we just knew it was going to happen. We
Yeah.
just didn't know how. Like I
Okay.
said, had never been here, didn't know anybody here,
Yeah.
and certainly didn't know anyone in the district.
So so you said 18 months you were there. So for about almost 2 years,
Hmm.
you're serving, you guys are serving in the church, you're in that position, you're doing what's asked, you know. I assume, I kind of feel like maybe at times did it ebb and flow? Like you'd be so focused in your local assembly, but
Hmm.
then that call or that burden or that drawing for Florida would just kind of arise sometimes, and y'all would
Sure.
discuss or something like that.
Yeah, it would, it was always in our hearts, but, in our minds, but
Hmm.
usually back there somewhere,
Yeah,
and yes, we were focused on the task at hand, but it would come up.
yeah,
And just every once in a while, when we would talk about it, just the
mm,
two of us, we didn't tell anyone. She told one friend, and I told a friend,
yeah.
and that was it. Nobody
Okay,
knew. Her grandfather didn't know. Uh, our pastor that and DeQuincy didn't know. Her pastor didn't know. No one knew. We just because we didn't know, really how God was going to do it. We knew
right.
that in His timing, if it was His will, He would do it, and then we would let everybody know.
Yeah,
And
so let
so,
me just contextualize this really quick. It's in the apostolic church now, whether it be UPC, whatever organization, there is such a push for home missions. Well, it'd be North American missions, as some would call it now. But I mean, tell me about really quick, just really brief, just how radical it would have been to say, okay, I'm going to leave Texas or Louisiana, that area, and we're going to go all the way to Florida. Because I feel like with the technology, they're putting out, somebody needs to go to Toronto, somebody needs to go these places, or somebody needs to go downtown, Los Angeles or just wherever,
mhm.
and there's that active
Yeah,
push, like we need somebody to go, as opposed to, not saying they weren't doing it back then, but I mean, obviously the technology wasn't like as it is today. And
right.
so God is speaking to you, dealing with you, and then you're saying, I feel like God is leading us to Florida, and that's such a big
Yeah,
that's a huge task.
it is. Yeah, it is. And like you said, the main difference now is we have the technology,
Yeah,
and there's social media, and there's all of this, pushing for churches everywhere, and that's great. But back then, they didn't have that.
yeah,
They didn't call out cities,
yeah,
or they might, I guess, at a conference or something sometimes, but I'd never heard it. And
yeah.
they didn't just call out cities. They didn't put cities in, in any kind of publications. We
Correct.
need churches here and things like that. The back then called home missions. The home missions division
Hmm.
was just a little smaller than it is. It was
Yeah,
than it is now, and you only knew of certain people who had started churches.
right,
You
right.
knew of the Wayne Huntleys and the
Correct. Yeah,
different ones that had started churches.
yeah,
You didn't really know anyone personally,
right.
that had started a church. So so it was really new to us,
Hmm.
but we knew that God was speaking to us, and God was dealing with us,
Mm.
and it kept growing, just like a tree or any kind of plant. It just slowly grew
Yeah,
within us, in particular while we were in Texas City serving there. So one day, my wife got a phone call from her grandfather, and he said, "Hey, I got a call," because he was retired at this time. Like I
okay.
said, her pastor was David Foss. Her grandfather was retired, but he
Yeah.
would preach out on weekends, just because he loved it.
Hmm.
And so he called her and said, "I received a call from the Florida district, and they want me to preach their camp meeting this year." And he said, "Would y'all want to go?" And so we knew right then that was an
Wow.
open door. Yeah, because
Wow.
he had no idea,
Yeah.
what we were thinking, and we knew that was going to be an open door.
Yeah.
And so we were like, "Oh my word!"
What year is this?
That was 97,
Okay, so 97. Okay.
97. Yeah. So so he came. He flew over here, or drove or whatever. Yeah, I'm sorry, he drove over here,
Hmm.
and we flew over here on Wednesday evening, and I went to the morning service on Thursday morning of
Hmm.
the Florida camp meeting. First time to ever be at their campgrounds, of course. And so after the service, we're in the kitchen area,
Yeah.
the small kitchen area, and uh, the district superintendent. the secretary, which was at the time was Bishop C. Patton Williams,
Mm.
Brother Gamlin, my wife's grandfather, Brother Gamlin, was sitting there. And then there was a gentleman sitting next to me, an elderly gentleman, which I didn't know. So I'm sitting around this table with all these elderly men, and I'm just listening to them talk, And I'm 30 years old, and just these men are great men, And even though I didn't know them,
Yeah.
but they had a lot of wisdom, and so they're sitting there talking, and then just suddenly the man next to me, Brother Griffiths, H.Q. Griffiths, who was, I didn't know it, but he was the presbyter over this section at the time. He
Yeah.
leaned over and said, well, he introduced himself and asked, my name and where I was at and all of that. And he handed me his card and said, we need churches in the Jacksonville area. Call me. I said, oh my word, door number 2 is
Yeah.
opening, And so I said, yes, sir. And inside, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I
Yeah.
cannot believe this
Yeah.
is actually happening. So my wife didn't go to that morning because we got in late, that night, the night before. She didn't go to that morning service. So I went back to the hotel. As soon as I walked in the door, I said, you're not going to believe what just happened. And so anyway, we get back after camp meeting and all that. We get back to Texas, and we're praying about it. I call Brother Griffiths,
Mhm.
and he says, "Can you come in October?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, the weekend of October 25th. Well, October 25th is my
Yeah.
birthday, so we
Yeah.
we came back October 25th that weekend. We met him on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock at a Hardee's over in Jacksonville
Yeah.
on Lane Avenue. And
Is that still there today?
I'm not sure. I
Okay.
think so. I'll have to go back and check. But so we met him there at the Hardee's at 8 a.m. And he said, "I want to take you to McClenny." And I thought, McClenny,
Which,
um,
for reference, McClenny would be about, it would be about, it's like northwest of
it's
here.
it's due west of Jacksonville on
Yeah, so
I-10.
it's more
Yeah,
like west, and really at the time, McClenny was not developed. Kind of still isn't developed now. Just
yeah,
woods, essentially.
yeah. So now he said there used to be an apostolic church there years ago, and he drove us by the building, which
Hmm.
was a denominational church at the time. He drove us around. He said there really needs to be a church here, and I agreed, but I didn't feel
Yeah.
anything. And then he said, "So now I'm going to take you to a town called Middleburg." I said, "Okay, never heard of that either." When I would look at the map of Jacksonville, I never really focused on anything outside of
Yeah.
Jacksonville. Um, so we got back on I-10, come back into Jacksonville, got on I-295, and we exited onto Blanding Boulevard to go down to Middleburg.
Hmm.
But when we got to Blanding and Wells Road, and just, I felt something. I said, "Wait, where are we right now?"
Mm.
And he said, "This is called Orange Park." And just immediately, I felt like this is it.
That's it.
And my wife said that
Praise
later.
God.
She said at the same time, she said, "This is it." And he said,
Wow.
"But don't worry about that. I'm going to take you to Middleburg."
For context, really quick, because they just, so they feel this call. Well, if you go through Blanding Boulevard right now, there, and you pass, you're going Blanding, and you're going south, like you're going toward past Wells Road, which would, where it'd be the Orange Park Mall is at. But just before there is a sign that says "Leaving Duval County, entering Clay County."
Mhm.
And so that is just proof of the spiritual atmosphere, that he felt a call, he felt that. And as soon as, of course, when he crosses that line from Duval into Clay, which would be Orange Park, there's a shift in the spirit. And I feel that shift, and I have felt
Mhm.
that shift
Yeah.
driving in and out of Clay County, going into Duval. I've just felt that shift, that it's just a different, there's something different, not better or worse, just
Yeah.
it's just different. And so, of course, the gentleman, he says, well, just don't worry about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. He said, "Don't worry about that." He said, "I'm going to show you Middleburg." And so he took us straight down Blanding, all the way into Middleburg, drove around a little bit, wasn't feeling it,
Yeah,
at all, which we already knew what we
yeah.
felt in Orange Park.
Which God was dealing with a man uh leading up to that, I'm sure, a man by the name of Michael Guerra.
Oh yeah, that's right.
to go to Middleburg.
That's
Thank God
right.
for him. So you go to Middleburg and you end up coming back up.
We came back to Orange Park. Well,
Okay.
actually, he brought us back into Jacksonville to our vehicle so that he
Okay.
could go on home. And when we got in our vehicle, we came back to Orange Park and spent the entire day driving around
Mm.
Orange Park, just blanding Kingsley, just making circles, really,
Yeah.
Wells Road, just driving around. We actually had a little video camera and we were
Oh, yeah.
videoing it. Yeah.
We need to
And
get those from the archives if
yeah.
you got it.
So, yeah. So, I mean, that weighed heavily on our heart.
Yeah.
And so the next morning, I preached for Brother Griffiths, and we talked a little bit. And we told him how we really felt about
Mm.
Orange Park, and he again tried to, kind of discourage us
Yeah.
not to go to Orange Park. And just to pray about Middleburg,
Yeah.
and he said you could draw people from Orange Park if you go to Middleburg. And I'd found out that, well, he told me that actually he said that someone had wanted to go to Orange Park and start a church, uh, and he was turned down.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh man. But we went back to Texas and we just began to pray. And eventually they sent us an application. At the time, we filled out applications by hand. So
Mm.
they sent us the application and filled it out with Orange Park on it, sent it back. And then the home missions director for Florida at the time called and said, are you sure you want to go to Orange Park or apply to Orange Park? And I said, yes. And he said, you don't want to change it to Middleburg? I said, no, sir, I don't. And I thought, and I was reading into that,
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure.
So we got a call from Bishop C. Patton Williams,
Mhm.
because during this whole time, uh, the previous superintendent passed away, and Bishop Williams was now district superintendent. So he called us and just to let us know when our appointment would be,
Mhm.
and was very kind to us. Actually, he said there's a couple in his church whose sister was um, the wife of or was related to the church in the pastor in Orange where we had
Oh,
assisted.
okay.
Uh, I think it was his they were brother-in-laws, I think it was. And so he said they have offered for y'all to stay at their home because they know y'all, not personally, but they know your family,
Right, right.
and of course the pastor. And so we did that, and they were in his church. He was very kind to us and told us when the appointment was going to be. So we drove over here to meet the board at district conference, and this would have been 98. And in the board meeting, again, this home missions director brought up Middleburg,
Mhm.
and I said Orange Park,
Yeah.
and so they sent us out like we do, and sometimes, and which I know that that's usually not good,
Yeah.
no.
About so you got approved to start a church in Orange Park. So tell us about um, going back to Texas City, the emotions, the pinnacle. Okay, now what, basically?
All right, so we get back to Texas City, and at that point, we tell the pastor there that we're working for, still kind of just keeping it close,
Yeah.
but we talk to the pastor, tell him we got approved and all of that. He's excited. The pastor's wife's excited. Everybody's excited that knows. So we start looking at making the arrangements to move here.
Yeah.
So we came back in May, spent the entire weekend,
This would be May of
98.
98, May of
Yeah,
98.
May of 98. Spent the entire Saturday, Friday evening and Saturday, just driving around Orange Park,
Mm.
looking at different apartments, different rental homes. Uh, it was just exhausting. And so that evening, we were at the hotel. My wife was tired, and I said, I've got to get back out there and drive
Yeah.
around some more and pray. And so I drove by these apartments at the time called Mariner's Wharf,
Mhm.
just off Wells Road. which we had received some information from them
Yeah.
through the Chamber of Commerce back in Texas City, but looking at the pictures and all of that, we thought there's no way we could, afford that,
Yeah.
because I was leaving a good job in Texas City and hadn't had, at the time, didn't have a job yet
Yeah.
here. So, but while she was at the hotel resting that evening, I drove around and I went back. I went to those apartments,
Mm.
and I was looking at them, and I thought, you know what? I think we really need to both look at these, and I
Yeah.
feel like this is it. So I went back and told her that evening. I said, tomorrow, let's go look at those apartments.
Yeah.
And so on Sunday, because we had to leave on Sunday, so to go back home, so I had to be at work on Monday. So we went to the apartments and told them, that what we're doing, what we're looking for, and just really, really felt like this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. So we signed up, made the application, signed up, and all of that, and made arrangements to move into this particular apartment, number 617,
Mm.
and go back to Texas, start making arrangements to move, and that was in May. So in July, we moved. We moved here. Got here in the middle of the week. In the middle of the week, in the middle of Florida District Camp meeting,
Mm.
and unloaded the truck. Had the big, huge 24-foot budget truck.
Yeah.
Pulling a vehicle behind it. Pulled in, unloaded everything, and then went to camp meeting Thursday night, Friday night, and they were very welcoming to us. New home missionaries, new church planners moving
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
and all of that. And Bishop Varnum and Bishop Williams both asked us to come and be with them on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and preach. So
Oh,
we
praise
did
God.
that. That was a privilege. That was a blessing. So then that next week, though, we after unpacking, we started looking. It's
Yeah.
time to start church,
Yeah.
and so we started looking and driving around and driving around and driving around, making phone calls, knocking on doors, trying
Yeah.
to find out where we're going to have service. And weeks went by and nothing's opening up.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm praying. God, I know you can do anything, and
Yeah.
we need a storefront and $50,000 to get started, and I know you can do that,
And he can
and
do
he
it.
can do that, but he chose not to.
Yeah.
So, again, weeks turned into, August, September. Finally, here comes, we're in October again. I mean, we're in October, and we still don't have a place to have
Yeah.
service. And I had Bible studies going in somebody's home, but no place to have church. And so one day I walked out of our apartments, or out of the apartments, and turned to the right and walked around the corner, literally just a few steps, and there's the clubhouse right there. And so I looked through the windows and I thought, my goodness, we can just have church here. Just
Yeah.
move some tables and chairs out of the way.
Yeah.
There was a little kitchen. We could put the tables in the kitchen and set up all the chairs. And there was a sofa on the back wall, and we could seat 30 people in
Yeah.
there. And so I went to the office, and the lady who had originally signed us up for our apartment was now manager of the complex. And as I was telling her, we haven't been able to find a place, she offered the clubhouse, and I said, well, that's why I'm here. So
It's
she
the
opened up
favor
her
of God.
calendar, and she said, she put us down on every Sunday for the entire year, for a whole year, all the
Wow.
way into the, past the, from October to October.
Hmm.
And I said, hopefully by then we'll have something, but yes, let's do that. So she put us in her calendar on every Sunday. And I said, now how much, do I
Yeah.
have to pay? And she said, how's $25 a week? And I said, I can do that.
We can do
I
that.
said, we can do that. I can do 25 a week. So we signed up, and we went back home. We had to go back for something the last weekend of October,
Hmm.
and which was my birthday weekend. We were in DeQuincy, and and my pastor announced that we're having our first service the following Sunday in Orange Park,
Yeah.
Florida. Took up a little offering for us, a good offering, I should say, for us. And we came back, and we had a little podium that someone had made for me. That was a whole different miracle there.
Yeah.
On our way back from finding this apartment that weekend in May, there was a van pulled over on I-10 way out in the Panhandle
Uh-huh.
in the middle of nowhere, and there was an elderly gentleman and his wife trying to change a flat. And I said, "Oh my goodness!" So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
pulled over, and I helped them change the flat. I
Mhm.
changed it for them, and so he started talking. He said, "Where are you from? Where are you going?" Told him the situation. He said, "You're with the United Pentecostal Church?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You know C. Patton Williams?" I said, "I sure do."
Yeah.
And he said, "And Mike Williams?" I said, "I sure do." He said, "I put pews in both of their churches." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, I do all kinds of things, like
Yeah.
that." So he said, "If you ever need anything, let me know." He said, "When you get your church started, if you need anything, he's like, if you need a podium, let me know." And so I called him when we moved in. I called him, and he made me this little wooden podium,
Yeah.
and it later was stolen, but it worked
We'll
for a
save that
few
for part
for a
two.
few years. Okay, yes, that'll be later. But so we came back, and on Sunday, November 1st, we lugged that big keyboard,
Yeah.
in there. Thank God it was right around the corner, because we had that big Yamaha Clavinova,
Yeah.
50 to 60 pounds, easy. We had our little sound system we bought, had the podium,
Yeah.
her music stand. Went in there, set everything up, set the sound system and all of that up, and had church, our first service, November 1, 1998.
November 1st, 1998.
Yeah, we weren't incorporated or anything yet, and all that came later, but we did have a family that we'd met, and they were in that first service, and we just acted like it was 300 people or so, we just had
I
church.
love it.
And so,
I love it. So, man, what an incredible journey. Incredible journey. Now, if I'm not mistaken, is this where the dispute is between your wife
this
and
is
I
the dispute
about
about
how
how
many
many.
people?
Yes. So I don't remember that couple that was here. I don't remember
Mm,
their kids being here in that first service.
yeah.
I don't remember two of the kids being there. So I thought that there were five, counting us two.
Yeah.
We had no kids at the time. I thought there were only five in the first service, but she says there's seven, because she said all three of their kids were there. And I don't remember that, but if she's right, there were seven in the first
Yeah.
service. So we're going to go with that.
We'll go with 7. How about
Yeah,
that?
we'll
We'll
go
go
with
with 7.
seven just in case.
We'll be generous.
Yeah, and then there was another couple that in that same complex lived above us, that we started a Bible study with. They,
Yeah.
they weren't in the first service, but they eventually started
Yeah.
coming and ended up staying a few years with us.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's how he gets to Orange Park, him and his wife. I Is that clubhouse still there?
It
Like
is.
technically?
It is an exercise room now, so it's
Oh,
got
okay. Oh, so it's technically
treadmills.
still there.
It's still there. It's got treadmills in it now.
I'll have to post that picture. In
Yeah.
fact, we'll post pictures from the archives
Yeah.
from the Pentecostals in Orange Park.
Absolutely.
We thank God for it. Before we close up, any particular story you remember from just the clubhouse? Just that scene, anything?
Oh wow. Well, so that was November 1st, our first
Hmm.
service, and then uh, 2 months later, um, my wife and I had the opportunity to go to Because of the Times, and we came back. And when we got back, I received a phone call from a lady, and she said, "We're just calling about your church, and we heard about it, and I just got some questions for you." I said, "Sure." She said, Are you on your first marriage?" I said, "Yes, it's only been 3 years." "Yeah, this is my first marriage." And it just some crazy. "Do you wear a pinky ring?" I said, I wear any rings." I was like, what is wrong with this person?" And she said, "Well, we're probably not going to come to your church, but we'll send you an offering." And I was thinking, that's enough. Well, so come Sunday, they said they were going to visit once. Come Sunday, it's church time and nobody's there. It's first time. You
Yeah.
know, the one family we had, which at this point we had I think 3 families coming. Everybody had a reason they couldn't be there,
Yeah.
and but here come this lady and her husband and their little girl, and we're like, oh no, you know. And so, but we had church. Somebody did end up showing up besides them, but
Yeah.
you know, we had church, and after it was over, they left, and she told her husband, she said, "We ain't coming here," and he said, "Oh yes, we are," and they're still here today, and that's the tires.
The tires, wow.
And so, but yeah, but then Easter came, and we had I think 35 in our first Easter service in that
Praise
club, in
God.
that packed into that little clubhouse. So
Well, thank God for the clubhouse.
yeah,
And we thank God for obeying the call. Thank you for
amen.
saying yes. And this is just the first of many. We will continue whenever, however uh, many parts it needs to be, but we'll continue about from clubhouse to the next venue, the
Yeah,
next location. We'll
yeah.
get into some stories, maybe even talk about how people came and gone. But Pastor, we thank God. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
There's even stories that I didn't know about, so this was very enjoyable for me. And thank y'all for watching. If you would please, I know this sound cliche, pretty cringe, but if you would like and subscribe, that way you would be able to know when these things come out.
Mhm.
And thank God for the Pentecostals of Orange Park.
Amen.
God bless you in Jesus' name.